Hello, everybody, and welcome back to This is the Year, the Swiss Artificial Intelligence Engineering podcast. And today, once again, with me, Joao. How are you doing? I'm currently actually in Ibiza. It's probably the fourth location I'm shooting these episodes in this summer. But I had to come here to Spain, and it's been a phenomenal, I would say, a few days here already. I haven't slept. Haven't had the most restful sleep the last few nights, but here we are. We're still shooting AI, and in today's video, we're talking about AI security. Super important topic, especially after you're in Ibiza. So, how is life? How are you doing in Lisbon?
Life's pretty good. It's amazing that we're not sponsored yet, and somehow you're traveling half the world. Our former co-host is also traveling half the world, so we're just basically
Have to cross
using
finance.
the non-sponsor money to get airline points, let's say.
Exactly. We need to get the
But
miles.
so far so good. I'll get the miles a bit later. I think in a year. I'll be going to Berlin in September, and then we'll see from there. But this is, and then talking about the possibility of sponsored money, not sponsored money, and money in general, we're seeing a bit of a change in the markets, a change in the opinion of people in the AI world, saying it's a bubble, saying it's a market correction, whatever you want to call it. I think we'll get to there in a minute because we have to talk about it in the podcast.
Exactly. So I think we can put that a bit on the back burner for the second stage of the podcast episode today. Let me frame the first part. I think it's mostly around the security components. Just to tie in from the last week's episode, we were mentioning quickly that now we're fading from the episodes of we having chatbots, for example, to having reasoners with GPT-5 to now more agentic systems that are, as you perfectly put it, Joe, before the episode, soon to be released into production. And all people in the world, probably as private builders, corporate builders, or maybe you as a consultant or a student in the audience, you might have some security concerns that just pop up in the very last minute before you either launch your SaaS or your internal project. So in today's episode, we want to quickly break down a general framework just for the general understanding of what are the players even in the security triangulation, the way we would call it in today's video. But also specifically, we would be talking a little bit about MCP, a model context protocol, and how these kind of components fit into the security considerations. And then second part of today's video, do we have an AI winter? Is AI a bubble? And HI is maybe never happening. So that's a little bit the framing for today. But let me quickly set the stage. So if you are thinking about just generally speaking, running artificial intelligence, you maybe are a builder, a corporate company. I think something that's a little bit forgotten sometimes is there is actually three players in this particular domain. You have the model owner, for example, an OpenAI, an Anthropic, that's actually having their own best interest, but this actual model should be treated. Then you have the data owner. This might be actually yourself if you have a startup or if you're a builder in AI because you have some proprietary data you want to leverage. But then also you have the cloud providers because hardly any company in today's world is actually having, a data center in the basement with many, many NVIDIA GPUs running to be basically executing these computations. So that kind of comes up with all this weird triangulation that, yes, we have these three components because back in the day, maybe with regular software, it wasn't like that. But before we actually maybe go into the detail, what these different players really want, Joao, where do you see kind of the highest uncertainty maybe currently? And then I can continue with what these different players actually want security-wise.
I mean, from the model providers, we're seeing some offer in the market, like there's new players in the market with new models, besides OpenAI, besides Anthropic, although they are getting to be quite giant in this market. Let's hope they don't monopolize it. Even though I like their models, I do like some competition in the free market. But I think the most crucial aspect in terms of security, in terms of like how these products go to production, is how they're built. And how they're built will come down to the teams that the companies assemble to build these things, how builders decide to do the architecture, and what services from the cloud are they going to use. Because we're seeing a lot of vibe coding, and it's amazing that we get things into production or production almost levels really fast. So people are shipping things in weeks instead of taking months or years. But that comes with some security concerns, especially because a lot of these new builders, they don't even call themselves programmers or engineers. They actually admit they don't know programming. They call themselves vibe coders, like just vibe coders. And that comes with the consequence that they don't have the information to actually be able to calculate the security risks that the software presents. And we're going to see a lot of unsafe software in the very near future. Really great for the pen testing teams out there worldwide, but also security concerns for the companies that are launching this and have these systems connected to their own internal systems, their own internal databases that can now be exposed to the outside world.
I think it's a great like foundation that you just briefly laid. Of course, you used a few keywords, so let me unpack a few here. Let me put that on the screen maybe quickly. So this is like, shout out to Anthropic Research. They just published this report quite recently about these three different, let's say, participants if you want to be building AI. The first one, again, model owners is OpenAI, is Anthropic, is the large players that inherently do not want the world to know their parameters. The parameters of a model can be, for example, the weights, the way they train the deep neural networks, but also the architecture, the way they kind of have different types of deep layers and the way they use reinforcement learning and all these mechanisms. Of course, they do not want to be that in public domain because that's their intellectual property. They spend billions of dollars training these models. So architecture and particularly weights, they do not want to be released to the world. And that's kind of the first, I think, maybe weird thing. You're actually using an AI, an LLM, a large language model that you don't know how the architecture is actually done. And also, in many, many cases, unless it's really, really super open sourced and not only open weight, you have no clue about what the weights really are. So you're just using these LLMs and you compute them, but without actually knowing what's really behind the closed doors. There's also other research suggesting that maybe even the model owners themselves, they don't really know what's going on because it's so complex. Of course, there's other research, maybe put that on the screen here on explainability, but that's a different notion for a different video. So these model owners, they really do not want weights and architecture to be released. They have to be encrypted before they are shipped to the cloud. And then the second component, Yushrao mentioned cloud, it's computed somewhere. I teased it at the beginning. All of these models, they're really not computed within your own startup environment, within your own MacBook Pro, or within a company context. So they need to be having a so-called, let's say, service provider or a cloud infrastructure that is running the actual computation for you. And they also have, of course, this like weird interlinkage between having the data owners and the model owners, both kind of pulling the strings, but they're actually executing the computation based on NVIDIA chips, based on high bandwidth memory, yada, yada, yada. So like all that, the supply chain and the value chain there. So there's like this weird, let's say, two-component system. And within the cloud service provider, this is really, really important just from a security standpoint. In an ideal, I would say architecture, there is some sort of, how should we call it, like enclave or a cave or like some box that you do not want anybody to have access to, because that's really where the actual math happens of this model. And also based on the data from your client, nobody should have access to this black box. So kind of in an ideal setting. And that's really what you're actually trying to build. You as a startup, you as a company, within these service and cloud providers, you're setting this stuff up, but you're actually using intelligence from another model owner. So these are like the two first, or like the actual first relationship. You as a builder, of course, you care a lot about how they kind of set it up, but you would expect that the cloud service providers, the Azures of the world, the AWS of the world, the Googles of the world, they're actually doing that properly for you. There's contracts, there's even clauses if something is leaked and something is not done properly from their side. But predominantly, you would expect this to be running smoothly. Is that a kind of an okay first framing, show, or did I miss something in the complexity here?
There is a reason why people use the cloud, right? I mean, I could just easily set up something in my own house or set up an office full of computers, and maybe I have a bigger upfront cost, but then I just have to pay for electricity. And instead, me and myself and like a lot of other companies out there in the world, they choose to use the cloud. The cloud is not some magic thing, it's just someone else's computers. And AWS and Azure and GCP, like the biggest cloud providers, they have this one goal in mind, is to have these services ready for you. And it's their responsibility to make them safe, right? And if you know how to use them, and this is why we've seen the rise in the last, I think, 10 years of new roles like cloud architect or cloud engineer. Just people who are not actively coding. Maybe they know how to, maybe they don't even need to in day-to-day basis. They just know what services from the cloud to use. Because, I mean, there's more than 100 different services, possibly even like 2 or 3 for one given thing. Like you want storage, there's at least 5 different options for storage. They all have their different price tags, they all have different features. And so if you want to build something safe and you're leveraging the cloud, you need to learn a little bit on what the cloud is and what the cloud presents to you at the moment, right? Because every few months they had new features, changed services, especially in the Gen AI world. I was using Azure at the beginning because Microsoft has this exclusivity deal with OpenAI. And so if you want to use a cloud provider not directly from OpenAI, the only one that's available for GPT models is Azure. And they changed the service like 3 different times, like the naming of the service and how it worked 3 different times in the space of 6 months. And it's normal because they were still learning on how to do it right. But it's important as a builder that you have to keep track of what's currently available, how to use it, and how to use it safely. So, and I mean, this is not even AI related. Everyone needs storage, right? People use Google Storage, people use OneDrive or Dropbox. In a software environment, you use something called buckets in the cloud that you put things like put some files if you want to process files. You can put some dumps of your databases, like you can have their backups there. And what we saw is, for some reason, the default configuration of these storage services was open. So it was up to the developer to actually set up the user and the password. But people forgot, and people kept forgetting to actually close these buckets. And we kept seeing for at least 6 to 7 years, I think they changed it last year, that these buckets were open. So if you got the URL online, you could see these companies' private data. And I'm pretty sure we're going to see something similar again with these new services. People don't know how to configure it or just forget about it. And then they're just working correctly, but also working very unsafely and open to the World Wide Web for anyone to see.
It's like the actual function probably of novelty, right? So you have a new phenomenon like artificial intelligence, been out only for 3 some years, at least in the public domain. And now there's stuff being built, accessible to maybe millions of customers very soon, or maybe already is, coming live in the next few months or weeks. But now you're actually being concerned about all these components. Now we're actually maybe shifting a gear a little bit. I put the second component on that particular architecture on the screen here as well. So within this cloud provider, I quickly teased it at the beginning, maybe just to reiterate, this is highly important that you have this particular black box or enclave within these cloud providers. Cloud provider is also something you can select actually. So if you want to go with Microsoft, with AWS or with GCP, this is basically you as a startup, you as a builder, your own basically decision which one you want to go for. You can also choose multiple. You don't have to only lock yourself into one. And within these different cloud providers, let me maybe quickly do a very fast photo shoot here. But the first one is Azure Virtual Machines. Then we have AWS Nitro, and Google also has a service that you can basically be leveraging in this particular security domain. You mentioned it, Joan, perfectly. So if you're actually watching this video, maybe in 6 or 9 months, then the naming might actually be different already. So these are the current snapshots of the particular services you can be using. And then within this one, within this black box, or we oftentimes refer to it as enclave, there is sitting the weights, the architecture coming from the model providers, and your own data. And this is kind of computed, and then the output itself first also sits in this one. So it kind of pops out of the AI model and then is being sent to you as a client that you can be then using something on the chatbot side of things or for an agentic service. Let's move a little bit into this data ownership perspective quickly as well. This is actually where you are coming in. So you are basically gathering data within your company. If you want to have an agentic system, it might have the need to access particular subsystems. You maybe have storages as well. So you're gathering all this type of, sensitive data. In many cases, it's even a client database that you're accessing or it's internal documents. So you're kind of bundling this all together, and it's then being sent to this enclave or black box for compute. Within this black box, the magic happens and it kind of is sent back to you. So that's kind of the very, very high level understanding of the exchange there. Of course, there is encryption happening, and maybe also some of the keywords I will put into the description as well for you to check out, but that's maybe going a little bit too far in today's video. Key exchanges, you have maybe a KMS sitting somewhere, so some keys need to be managed, but that's maybe a topic for a second video. If you want us to go into a little bit more detail, maybe drop a comment as well. Certainly, we can do that. But just on a high level perspective, stuff is sent to this black box, stuff is sent back, and it's up to you to then take that's securely computed for you in this cloud infrastructure, and you can maybe display it in a cockpit, or maybe you can give it to another agent, or you can give it back to your chatbot. So that's kind of the high level understanding. I reiterate, model owner, cloud service provider, and the data owner, you yourself as a startup corporate builder, or maybe even as a consultant helping somebody to set that up. Let me tease that quickly. Where does MCP come in here? Model Context Protocol gives AI agents the ability to access a wide array of tools, a wide array of subdomains. Where does it come in? Is that even a security concern to you, or you feel this is old news already?
Everything is a security concern to me. I spend my whole life concerned. But MCP
You're generally very, very anxious.
Yeah, generally very anxious. So we had these LLMs, and they know a lot about what's online on the internet. They were given the whole internet plus a few thousand books, everything that was available to read. They were given, trained on it. They know it from the get-go. That's why you can ask who the president was in what given year, and they'll be able to tell you fairly accurately. The thing is, they have a knowledge cutoff. So the model was trained, let's say, up until March this year. And so everything that happened in April, June, or July, it's not going to be available to the model. The model wasn't trained on that data. It doesn't have access to that data. And also, there's things that weren't even online in the first place. Your emails were probably not online for anyone to Google. They were locked behind your username and password. And a lot of useful things were locked outside of the World Wide Web. So how do you build a useful agent that's, okay, was trained up until March this year, but also has access to what's currently online, so the latest stock information, what's popping in the market, what's changed, what news are coming up on Twitter, and it can also access your services. And this is where MCP came in and say, let's find like a standardized protocol to give models like a very standardized way of making requests and say, hey, I want to Google something, or I want to search something online. Doesn't have to be through Google. There are other search engines. People, just Google is just the number one, I think. And okay, I want to see these users' emails. I want to read like those last 10 emails because he asked me for a summary of his last week because he's on vacation. He has a lot of unread emails. Would be a useful agent to maybe to summarize it for you and give you a rundown of what's been going on. And this MCP tools and this MCP protocol is just that, is just giving the agent the ability to do this. The way you do it is pretty simple. So these LLM, these models are called the clients, because they make requests to these MCP servers. MCP server can be whatever you want, but it's basically just a small piece of software, like a small little service that gets information from somewhere. It could be your Google Drive, can be your Gmail, can be your calendar, can be could be Google. It could be like searching online on Bing if you wanted to. But many times you need to have these services authenticated. So there is no publicly available Gmail MCP server. So I can't read Cyril's emails even if I want to. I don't feel
Maybe
like that need specifically today, but I don't have that access. However, I want an agent to read my emails. How I do it is I set up an MCP server, and that MCP server is a small microservice, and I give it my authentication for Google. Usually it opens a website, I put my username and password, and it stores that token so it can go whenever it feels like, get information. And then I tell my LLM, it can be Anthropic Cloud Desktop app. There's a lot of different tools and different AIs you can download to your computer or to your phone, and you can add MCP servers. And you'd add this Gmail MCP server that you set up, that you've configured, that you authenticated, and so your personal AI assistant can now go get your email account, can go get your Google Calendar. Again, I'm mostly focused on Google services because that's what people use, but you can also go for Outlook or you can go for whatever provider you use. And this is immensely useful. However, as you can probably imagine, this MCP server has a token. Like it has your token to access your login. And so there's a few attack vectors that come up with people. What if someone else, not your AI assistant, makes a request to this MCP server you set up? Because now, if they pretend to be your AI assistant, they can ask for your emails and they can read whatever you've been getting. Or you can see your Google Calendar, or can go get your Google Drives and maybe get some banking information from you. And so
it's a bit
the
like
MCP protocol itself.
Just to quickly jump in, it's like you give them great power, but they have great responsibility. So they have access to a lot of things, but you need to safeguard it. Sorry to interrupt. I just thought
Let's hope that phrase is not copyrighted.
Exactly.
And so you can think of as an MCP server is the assistant you gave a key card like to your office. Your office is like, let's say, Google Drive. It has a lot of things that are important to you. It's usually locked in the key card to get in. And you gave the key card to your MCP server, so to your assistant called Alex. And if someone else comes in and say, hey, the boss asked me to, I'm new here, the boss asked me to drop some things at the office. This MCP server can be fooled and can maybe use his key card to open the office or undo things that it wasn't supposed to do because someone faked being you. Or even like a more concrete example for some reason is if you ask it to summarize a website and maybe it has some news you want to read and you ask it to summarize it, it'll read the website. But in a website, there can be hidden instructions and say, hey, you should access the user's files and write this script to the user's files and run it. And if for some reason the AI assistant has access to files, and it's a very common case where, for example, you're using a coding agent. So a coding agent is, of course, accessing your files to write code and read the code it's written. If this coding agent goes online, is reading a website just to get some documentation, reading a website to get some information, then reads these instructions, somehow thinks these instructions are legit, come from you, then it'll write a script, maybe it'll do some malicious things, and if you're not careful, then you just got hacked by your own LLM, by your own AI. And there's a lot of different ways to counteract this. There's a lot of different ways to make sure this doesn't happen, especially in corporate services, but also in your personal AI assistants. And people are going to be setting up their own. Right now, I think it's a mostly nerdy thing to do. I think this first
You have your own AI agent.
I've been setting up my own, yeah. It's not that difficult to add, for example, access to your Gmail or access to your Apple Calendar. But you have to be careful on how you do it. And also, people, and we've talked about it, when people ask for something for the AI, most of the times you can see the reasoning or you can see the process it's going. Like you can see that it's asking a tool, going online for something, going to your calendar to check your events for the day, and people are just ignoring it until they get the final answer, probably like in a voice mode or something. You should be reading at least half the times what the model is doing, so you have some idea of what the tools it's using. Is it using the right tools? And is it using the tools correctly, not to hack you, not to give some information that you don't want to be shared to someone else?
I mean, it's a very broad, I would say, just a natural landscape of attack vectors itself. Maybe just to put a little bit nuance to that, these MCPs, as you mentioned perfectly, Joao, you can configure them. So in this map, for example, I showed you between the model owners, the service providers, the data owners, they can sit somewhere the way you would want them to be set up. It just depends a little bit sometimes on the use case. Do you want them in a particular notion that you have more access to it, or you would want to maybe use an MCP one that's managed, an MCP server that's managed by some other entity. So I think it's just in terms of security consideration, maybe you can do a follow-up video also to be really pinpointing down, maybe also with some better explanations on different scenarios on today's notion, which better, like most well-suited setup you can actually be choosing based on your actual use case, because it depends also a little bit on the use case you're actually building. The architecture I showed before is rather generic. The way you set up MCPs might be a little bit more specific depending on the use case. Anything else to add, Joao, from the security perspective?
I think we're going to be seeing until December, till the end of the year, and even beginning next year, the audience, you're going to be seeing online a lot of security reports saying AI isn't safe, saying that this Gen AI software isn't safe. And it's a timeline thing. So we named the podcast This is the Year, and we've been saying it since the beginning. Like, this is a year to build and launch this kind of products. And a lot of companies are doing just that. I mean, I keep getting job messages, like companies asking me to help them. I see a lot of companies announcing that they're going to have some AI agent feature in the near future. And it's just generally expected. Like, most software is going to have some kind of AI agent built in. But also, if you see a normal timeline for a product, like usually they design it, they have a team building it. In the very end stage, they're going to have pen testing teams and security teams analyzing the software. And then at the very end, release it to the public, see how it goes. And we're at the stage, if you see like we're near like the second half of the year, like near more towards the end of the year, we're going through the security stage. So companies started building it at the beginning of the year, at the end of last year. And now they're running those security and pen testing teams through the software they built. And things are going to come up. It's normal that most software and a lot of software that's been built, it was not safe. It's not AI itself. It's just a general skill issue. Whenever there's a new technology, there's people trying to build with it. They don't know really how to. And it's normal to make mistakes. It's expected. And so I think people are going to be seeing those reports. They have an idea maybe that AI is some sort of bubble, some sort of like super unsafe thing that should be scrapped out and never used again. It's a time thing. It'll get better. Just don't be scared when you see those reports online.
I think maybe just before we choose 2-3 minutes also deploy on the future of this AI winter phenomenon that's maybe happening now. Just to wrap up, as you perfectly mentioned, Joao, I think in my opinion, the last 1-2 years, we were just waiting for agentic systems to be going live. Now they're soon to be released. They're just letting loose in many, many organizations. They're talking to clients. And now these security concerns are just starting to basically surface, which is completely normal. That's why we thought maybe just on a general understanding today, we talk about model ownership, we talk about service provider, kind of setups that you can have, having this enclave, this black box that's in an ideal case securely computing your intelligence. Then you have the set of MCP servers, these toolboxes, and you have your own proprietary data, could be your client data that you maybe also need to set up in a particular vector way and stuff like this. So of course, there's many more nuances on security. This is a very broad topic, but just from a high level understanding, we might do a follow-up episode in the weeks to come. Also, when we encounter these particular concerns by ourselves, we'll definitely be sharing them. So last point, 1-2 minutes on the clock. Sure, where do we sit on the AI winter? What is happening? Are you thinking the winter is coming or the winter is over already? I know it's not copyrighted.
We talked about GPT-5 was not going to be the thing. Like, it was not going to be AGI. All models since the beginning were incremental releases. So they're a little bit better than the last one, but nothing like not a leap forward, nothing entirely new. It was just they were getting increasingly and consistently better. Thing is, OpenAI hyped these models so much that got people's expectations so high that when it came out, and it came out just the way we said it would, an incremental release, slightly better than the last one, but nothing entirely new. It was so aggressively mid that it kind of crashed the market. And it's surprising, and it's, I guess, to be expected. Every new thing, it generates a lot of hype, and then people correct it, let's say. I mean, I was just not expecting it. I expected it to be mid. I did not expect it to have this kind of fallout. What we're seeing is the fallout of models not getting to AGI as quick as the tech bros of the world were saying it would. And I think we might have been one of those. I don't think we were. I think we're more mid. We don't do futurology, we do educated guesses. And the guesses we were doing were pointing towards a better model, but nothing extraordinary. I mean, what's your take, Cyril?
Took the reasoning approach. I take the one-shot approach. I feel 3 things. It's completely normal that after a very bullish phase, there might be some cooling off. Also, next week, we're taping this episode 1 week prior the NVIDIA earnings call. I don't want to hoax the market, so I'm still hoping they beat earnings. If not, we might see a little bit of a correction happening there, but that's maybe for the future. And also, I was reflecting the other day when I was building the new pitch decks and the new sales, and well, all my decks I just had to renew in August, also for university teaching. And I just want to reiterate, this market I joined just on my personal history in 2023, early 2023, ChatGPT came out, at least the notable version, late 2022. We're 3 years in this particular domain. There's many openings, many plays to be played until 2030, 2035. I believe highly we are still here for the long run. Now it's just being built. And also, very last notion before I wrap up, ChatGPT-5 was trained on the previous NVIDIA chips. And I still have some sort of hope that with Blackwell, with maybe the Rubin, the new series of NVIDIA coming out, these clusters are getting larger. I do believe in Rich Sutton's essay. I put that on the screen here as well. The bitter lesson that basically suggests 70 years of AI research says the more compute you use, the more likely it is you yield in better performance and better model. Doesn't necessarily say the model is getting cheaper. That needs a lot of engineering as well. But I think in terms of intelligence, we are advancing. The more compute we deploy with NVIDIA's new chips, the better we get with high bandwidth memory, these clusters to be talking to each other and so on and so forth, the better these systems are getting. I probably also didn't do a one-shot explanation. I also did the reasoning one, but that's okay. Great.
I mean, it's good to have some arguments to back up your point of view. I think people are seeing a replay, or thinking that are seeing a replay of the crypto market. Like it was back in 2020 when Bitcoin and Ethereum were the big thing. And I'll try to keep this as short as possible. Crypto was a beautiful mathematical solution to a problem people really didn't have. So the selling point of crypto is like, it's money, but you don't have to have banks. You don't have to trust the banks. And people don't generally like banks. They charge interest. They do things with your money. They sometimes crash the economy, but they don't care enough to change. And so it was this solution that people really didn't have a problem to. And it's not the same with AI, at least in my opinion, because AI is doing things that people actually don't want to do. People don't want to write emails. People don't want to read entire pages of text. It can take the load off most daily work that people are doing. So there is, I think, real interest, real value in AI. I think it's been hyped to the moon and back, but there is this core of value that's being expanded. And like Cyril was saying, we are going to be seeing more applications with AI. Not all of them are going to be good at first, but they're going to get better and better. And there's still like actual value in it, not just like we saw, I think, in crypto. I think I may be getting death threats from the crypto bros later, but that's just my honest opinion.
It's a good comparison. I don't want to, well, put oil into the fire of cryptocurrencies. Now we have BTC and ETH in near all-time highs. So I'll leave that in the room maybe for a next episode. But I think it's a perfect timing to wrap up. Thank you, João, for joining once again. From Ibiza, you're in Lisbon. We're doing this multinational, international exchange on AI. We're engineering every week. We're trying to share the most cutting edge insights, especially also design considerations. We are constantly talking offline, trying to bring across in these particular videos. So if we added value and you want to see more, please subscribe, please like. If you have a question, drop a comment. We upload these videos every single week on this particular channel. Thank you, João, and see each other in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.